So let us continue searching for opponent's counterplay and fighting against it. But before, I'd like to tell a few words because I guess you might start to have a feeling that it's getting too subtle, too complicated, too refined, if you want. You know, all those my explanations about the small nuances. You get the pawn here or there, you know, the piece should be staying here because in 10 moves, you know, it will be very important, etc. I guess some of you might get the feeling that, okay, yeah, I understand in general what this guy means, but I can never manage it myself. It's just too subtle for me. But, you know, the thing is that chess has many different dimensions. So basically, you know, improving in chess is something similar to a computer game. So you pass the first level, then when you just enter the second level, you have a feeling that it's just too much for you, it's just too difficult, but at some point you easily you know, solve the second level, then you get to the third one, etc., etc. The only difference that in chess the amount of levels is infinite, and nobody has you know, achieved the last level. Yeah, it's not possible for a human being. So I mean, yeah, slowly it comes. You know, there is a lot of experience is required, time. You know, okay, for me it took many years before I became a professional, strong professional player. Before I understood certain things which I'm telling you now. So there is no wonder. You know, of course, it will not be so smooth. You'll not manage tomorrow to think like a top grandmaster. But I mean, my experience shows that it will stay somewhere if you listen to it carefully, if you just try to understand. In general, the most important is, and what I'm trying to give to you is this understanding of how a professional top chess player thinking during a game, what parameters he considers, what kind of problems he's trying to solve during the game, just to give you the dimensions of those problems, and what kind of questions we top players are raising, and how do we try to solve it. Yeah, I think it is, even if you cannot yet manage to understand completely everything or implement it in your game, but you know, it's a slow process. I believe still it is important for you to, it widens the horizons. You know, it will make you, you know, deeply understand how rich is chess, how many things you can discover, and maybe then playing a game, you will, you know, it will help you to go deeper and to, let's say, to look at the position with a deeper view, you know, one move further than your opponent. And slowly, you know, you improve, because once you get the right method of thinking, once you understand what should you take care of, you know, when you are thinking on your move or just looking at a certain position, trying to assess it, then, you know, slowly you start to improve. The most important is that you have a, you know, the correct base, so to say. So you know what should you do, how should you look at the position, and what is the kind of what parameters you should try to take into account when you are, you know, choosing your move. So don't worry, it's even if it's a bit too complex, it's still, I can assure you, I have a lot of experience, and I had the same feeling quite often that some things are just too complicated. But then all of a sudden you start to improve in it, you start to do it better and better, even if it's not, you know, even if you still feel that you don't really understand fully certain aspect, but in fact you do, your subconsciousness is working. So, and in any case, again, this is a very difficult aspect of chess, positional, positional play, prophylactics. It is a lifetime job, and nobody is perfect at it. So, but maybe it's the most important element for each of player to improve, because once he managed to improve there, because it's most difficult maybe element to improve, then the fruits come, they're much bigger and tastier than if you learn just some opening line or maybe solve some tactical problems. So relax, don't expect too much immediately, even if you don't understand fully certain concepts or certain, positions, what I'm trying to show you. No problem, no problem. I can assure you it's working up there in your mind, and you will improve if you listen to it carefully, if you try and hard, and if you really make effort while listening to this course. I can guarantee you that it will have some effect. So now, after this hopefully motivating speech, I will come to show you some more examples. Again, it's getting more and more complicated, more and more complex, but I will try to be honest. I'm trying to go very slowly to explain all those positions, in great details, because I understand that the listeners, they have very different, can be different levels. So sometimes for some of you, it might be too complex. Certain things might be a little too simple for some professional chess players, if they are listening to this course also. And I think it can be useful for players of even of a professional level. But anyways, yes, what I want to do, I don't want to simplify it too much, because then it will not be truth. I can try to explain it in a more simple way, but that's not the way we think when we play a chess game. So that's why, that will be a kind of, Anna Karenina on internet, on 3 pages, just like it's becoming very fashionable nowadays. You have some text which explains what is it all about. Yes, it gives you certain idea about this work, but it's not it's not really very useful for you. You will not really understand or enjoy it really. So I try to make it serious. I try to make it, as if every person who is listening to it is my personal pupil and as a very strong chess player, or at least potentially a strong chess player. And yes, so let's see. I hope you will like it, and you will not find it too difficult for you. Anyway, as we know, no pain, no gain. So now let's have a look at the next example. This is a very complex, strategically complicated position from my game with White against Sergei Tivyakov from FIDE World Championship knockout, in 1999. So I'm White, it's my move. Again, well, Phil, you remember hopefully those questions. So first 2 questions, if White can mate in one, no. Then is there any threat, direct threat? No, quite obvious, Black doesn't have threat. Then the most important question comes in such a scenario. So what is Black's next? What is he trying to do? Well, I can give you a hint if you want for this time, and it's not too complicated anyway. It's pretty clear that Black wants to push his pawns on the queen side, b5, a5, b4, and to create counterplay there. So try to think in general. Again, in such situations, what I usually do is of course, yeah, that's clear that there is a plan, and it's not so terrible, you know, even to allow it. So first of all, you have to check if and try to understand if you can allow it or you have to fight against it. And secondly, to also, what is always very useful, to have a general understanding of which piece will go. So what are the best positions, squares for your pieces? Because of course, for the moment, your knight on h3 is a bit, yeah, out of play. I would say these bishops on e2, f2 are, yeah, also probably can become more active one day. So try to see a certain picture. Let's say if black is doing nothing for the next 3-4 moves. So where would you put your pieces ideally? That will probably not happen in the game because your opponent is also playing moves, but that's quite useful to understand for yourself. So what is the ideal setup you want to have? And so to say, plan. What is your plan of action? And yeah, and then try to think what to do about this quite clear and straightforward idea which black has in mind, pushing pawns on the queen side. Well, again, let's try to first to assess the position. I like white theoretically, or let's say potentially. Potentially, white has a very clear plan of improving his position. I mean, he has two bishops. I mean, definitely the black bishop on b7 is solid but slightly passive. So, okay, if white has time, just imagine your knight can be on g3. Yeah, white would just be better, clearly. So, in fact, how would I settle my pieces in this position? Let's say if you let me a few moves, yeah, so I would probably do. Where would I put my bishop from e2? Probably to c2, a very nice square, yeah, because white sooner or later will try to push e4, and if he manages, that is a big deal, yeah. Then e5 comes, and white has a potentially very strong attack on the king. So bishop would go to c2, probably. Ideally, let's say, let me just play a few moves just to show you. Let's say black is just doing nothing. So ideally, I would rather play rook e1, whether this one or a1, whatever, yeah. Maybe I would have my bishop h4, looks nice because g5 is always weakening. Let's say knight f2, yeah, one of the possible setups, and I'm ready to push e4, and this is... yeah, so something like that, or another way of playing it is maybe you can imagine playing rook e1. Again, black is just inviting his opponent to show where he wants to put his pieces. So maybe knight to f4, bishop to g3. So, and then again, one day maybe e4 will come. So in general, yeah, that is pretty clear that if we can do it, and one of the main ideas for white is sooner or later to push e4 here. But then, so that is clear, yeah, we know what we want to do in general. Now, the very important strategical question is what to do about black's counterplay. So let's try first. I'm just trying to give you an example of the thinking process which I have in such situations. So first I try to see, let's say I just ignore it. So I do my thing. Let's say rook f1, I played b5, bishop f1, for example, a5, bishop h4. Yeah, I'm trying to prepare knight f2, e4, but then b4, queen probably to c1, let's say queen f8. No, I'm not happy with it. Yeah, black has his counterplay. Let's say if I play knight f2, he can go rook c8, maybe even already getting c3 at some point. I don't see how can I get e4. These pawns are very unpleasant, yeah, to have with white. So black I think black is doing very well here. So, okay, another idea is maybe to play bishop d1. Again, yes, if I try to do the same, yeah, the same, just ignoring black's play, let's say queen d2, b4. Again, it's unpleasant, difficult. I mean, black is pretty quick with his counterplay. Yeah, rook e1. We are still far from playing e4, and black is again maybe can play rook c8, maybe at some point c3, knight b6. Who knows? Maybe even b3, knight a4, c3. I mean, I don't like it. Yeah, too much counterplay. So finally, after trying those very straightforward ways, yeah, I get to the idea that probably I must do something about this counterplay. Yeah, I must try first before I start to regroup my pieces into the places which I want those pieces to be. I need probably to do something about this b5, a5, b4. So, okay, this is the first step in this kind of logical chain, you know, when you are trying to assess the situation, try to understand what to do. Yeah, my feeling is that something has to be done about it. I don't like when black's pawn reaches b4 square. Then once I decide something has to be done about it, so let's try to think what. Because from other point of view, it's more or less the only black's plan. Yeah, if he doesn't manage it, then he doesn't have. I mean, probably sooner or later I will get my setup. Yeah, because there is not much play. Black is of course very solid, but otherwise he would be rather passive if not this. So what are the options? Okay, let's say there is a very radical way to play b4, just trying, because I guess c takes b3, this is definitely in white's favor, yeah, because now let's say after a6 I have a4, and now white has actually very nice play on the queen side already, yeah. He can maneuver his knight to d3, rook c1, and white is simply better. He has a very nice pressure on the queen side, so cb3 is definitely not an option. And maybe if a5, white can try to close this flank, b5, and then to start playing there in the king side and the center. But even though this is not so clear, but what I don't like really is b5, yeah, and this is a problem. Yeah, now again a5 is coming, and I don't see really how can I prevent this counterplay, because a4, let's say if I keep on trying to block the position, then maybe a5 is quite strong, and yeah, black is in time to create counterplay here. And otherwise, anyway, he will start to play a5, so maybe bishop d1, a5, and bishop c2, but there are different ideas. Let's say a b, knight b6, trying to go to a4. Also, I'm quite worried about knight, maybe transferring the knight to c6, whether after taking on b4 or even immediately. Knight b8, knight c6, yeah, then my b4 pawn might be weak. So, yeah, I achieved to stop for a while at least black's counterplay, but maybe the price is too high for it. Yeah, I mean this pass c4 pawn, I also not something I'm happy with. So b4, no. Then there are two other logical ideas, which is another idea is to play a4. Of course, black will probably continue with a6 and b3. b5, again, cb3, queen b3 is in white's favor, so b5. And now, yes, if I take ab, and probably b takes c4, b takes c4, that will, that is rather safe for white, I would say. But black has some counterplay on these open lines, and in the worst case, he can change all rooks. And I'm not sure I will ever manage e4. White will be fine, he will not lose, but no real chances to win. Just too much material is out of the board. Then maybe b takes c4. Yeah, that is a serious consideration. So the same idea, because d takes c4 in general, it's very dangerous, yeah, in this position, because the central pawns, maybe first I can even play queen b2, who knows, or maybe even e4 immediately. In general, the central pawns are, especially here, are stronger than the side pawns in the middle game. So, and it's quite difficult for black to move these pawns, because before queen takes c4 is hanging the pawn, and if you want to protect it first, then there is always rook b1. So white is able to stop black's pawn, and then the center is really powerful. Yeah, my bishops start to open up, and white is better. But of course, bc4, bc4. Yeah, now at least I secured. I managed to secure, you know, my queen on c3, and that the pawn is not getting to b4. And that is an interesting option. Let's say I can now try to get my bishop to c2. But the point is that, yeah, black has a certain counterplay connected with the b4 square here. For example, a5, rook b1, let's say bishop c6, bishop c2, very logical play, and rook e b8. And, you know, black wants to go rook b4, rook b8. So I did not really fully manage to stop counterplay anyway. So now I will give you some quite a logical line. Let's say rook takes b8, knight takes b8. Okay, if rook takes b8, at least the a5 pawn is hanging, even though black has some counterplay anyway. So now knight is going to b4. So this b4 square is still, yeah, quite annoying. Yeah, so also I have potentially weak pawn on a4, which black can attack. That is interesting. That is something to consider for white. And I checked it with the computer because this play is quite logical, and it gives a certain line, quite a logical line, bishop h4. So white starts to push e4. White is getting his play. Black is, of course, quickly getting his own play. Knight a6, e4. And now, probably after knight b4, finally it gets to a very sharp, complicated position, pretty double edge. So let's say after e5, black has knight e4. Of course, computer comes up with some nice tactics. And fe, queen takes h4. Let's say e d5, bishop takes d5. Black is okay. Yeah, I mean, white has achieved something, but black also managed to get his counterplay. The knight on b4 is good. And probably the position is approximately equal, even if it's quite unbalanced. But black must be fine here. Anyways, I'm not sure that at the start position white is really better. So it's an option anyway. But then finally, after all those you know, considerations, then you get to the other idea, what I played, and I think this is the best move. I played b3 first. So my idea is that after b5, which was played in the game, bc4, bc4, here I don't have this weakness on b4, yeah, this weak square on b4. And actually, in such situations when, you know, your opponent has his plan and you have your own play on the other side of the board, each little nuance at tempi might be extremely important, yeah, in this situation. By the way, I think that after b3, maybe rook ac8 was an interesting way of playing. It looks a bit strange, but maybe it makes sense. After b takes c4, bishop a6. Again, dc4, e4 is usually not good, yeah, for black. That's not the point. But the black has this idea of trying to take with the bishop on c4 and to try to organize some play on the c line. But in general, this structure, let's say rook fc1, bishop takes c4, and knight f4, this structure is more comfortable for white, because now black has this weak pawn on d5 and no real counterplay anymore, you know, with pawns b5, a5, b4 is becoming difficult to arrange. So white can even play bishop d1, but still knight f4, for example, is fine. It just tactically works, because if bishop takes c2, there is queen takes c8. So taking with a check, and then I take back the bishop, and two rooks are here are clearly stronger than the queen. And let's say queen f8, queen bishop d3, maybe even the most accurate move, takes on d3. White has a nice plus. Probably black's position is acceptable, but still it's a comfortable plus for white. Slightly better, so yeah, why not? I'm quite happy with this type of position because this d5 pawn is always going to be a weakness. So after b3, b5, that's why Sergei Tyryakov played b5. Of course, this is the most principal way of playing bc, bc. And now bishop d1. Very important move. Not only that in general, bishop on c2 is staying well in this position, but also it's very important to cover the a4 square. So you see now the plan of rook b8, bishop c6, doesn't work because there is no b4 square. Yeah, so once I put my bishop on c2, next, it's very difficult for black to organize, to have any squares where to enter on the b line. And but he badly needs his counterplay. Otherwise, in few moves, white will, do his plan. White will deliver all this bishop c2, rook e1, bishop h4, knight f2, e4, and he will be much better. So bishop d1 and knight b6. Yeah, so it's clear that black is trying by all means to create counterplay, trying to get to a4, because I don't really see what else he can do in this position. Bishop c2, bishop c6, and now a4. And you see, it's actually funny. It's just maybe one tempi, but this is exactly the tempi. Let's say if black can always play knight bd7, and it will be, just a tempi compared to the position after a4, a6, b3. But it is an important tempi because black lost time playing knight b6, knight d7 back, and white will just be in time. You remember that variation I was showing you, it was just, move per move that black was in time to organize his counterplay and to equalize. Here with the tempi, he will probably not manage it, and white will be better. So now it's a kind of long operation. Yeah, you play b3, you take a4, bishop to c2. A lot of moves to stop black's counterplay, but it's worth it because also those moves, in a way, bishop d1, bishop c2 again is a multifunctional move. Yeah, I prevent counterplay there. I take, I control the b3, a4 squares, and at the same time, my bishop is much better placed on c2 and will potentially be part of attack, on the king side. So a4. So what to do now for black? Not so easy. For example, a5 is the same plan. Already doesn't work so well because after rook b1, for instance, and now I already get another rook to b1, and let's say rook eb8, bishop g3, rook b7, knight f4. Seems to be that white is better. Black is not in time to double on the b line, and he had to go with this rook to b8 because otherwise, of course, the a5 pawn was hanging. So I'm just in time to stop black's counterplay on the b line. What else? Computer, strangely enough, is proposing g5 move. Well, not really the move a human would play. It makes some sense because black is threatening bishop d7, and then that white doesn't have knight f4. But I don't see much sense in it because I don't think it's such a great idea because after king h1, bishop d7, I just have knight g1. I get my knight to e2, and it's really weakening g5 in a long run. Yeah, well, anyway. I don't think it's a fantastic idea, and in any case, people, they don't play like this. They don't weaken the king without a big purpose. Yeah. So a4, so then queen d7, very logical way. So black, again, you see, is trying to get his counterplay somehow. And queen d7 makes a lot of sense because after a5, now the pawn is hanging on a4. Of course, white can just protect it playing queen a3, but yeah, I don't like, of course, this queen on a3, which is simply protecting the pawn on a4. even if, of course, it makes sense, because after a5, that's the move I played. Of course, black cannot play knight a4 after queen a3. His knight is trapped, and he's just losing the knight. So after a5, now knight c8. So black is still trying to create some counterplay, maybe with playing knight d6, knight b5 at some point, pushing the c pawn, or at least having the knight on d6 to stop e4. But it's already quite clear that white have achieved his goal. So it's and on top of this, there is a very unpleasant move, bishop h4, available here, because of course playing g5 is it's quite difficult move to make. After bishop g3, knight d6, for example, white has bishop e5. You see, white is already very soon will start a dangerous attack on the king, and black is, well, not really having too much counterplay on the other side of the board. So after bishop h4, with a heavy heart, I guess black played knight h7. Still, black's position is pretty solid. I mean, it's still not easy to prove a big advantage for white, but of course things have improved significantly for white in the last few moves. So knight f2, you see I'm trying to arrange my setup. Knight d6. Maybe black wants to play at some point f5, at least to block the e4 move, because that is the main battlefield in this particular position, is about white pushing e4. Fortunately for white, because just some moves ago it was all about b5, b4 and black's counterplay. Now it's all about black trying to stop white from developing his own initiative. And knight g4, also very unpleasant move. You see knight e5 is threatening. The knight would be extremely strong on e5. For example, knight b5, queen b4, queen e6, knight e5, and well, it's obvious that white is better. He has a lot of initiative. So black played knight f5 now, but bishop f2, well, you see, yeah, that everything is clear. Black's pieces are discoordinated. It's still not too bad position, but obviously white is better. There is not even a shade of a counterplay anymore, and all black is trying to do is trying to stop white from pushing e4 and just tearing into pieces black's position. So he went f6. Anyway, yeah, the game continued. I managed finally to push e4 rather soon and managed to win a game. After e4 position opened up, and of course two bishops are very powerful in the open position, and I managed to win a game before the first time control even. So quite instructive, I believe, this example. Let's analyze what have happened in this game. What did I do? First, a general understanding of the position, assessment, what are the plans of both sides. Then second, asking the right question, what is black's idea, what is black's plan. Well, in this particular position, it was not too difficult to guess that black wants to push his pawns. Then, exactly in accordance with my methods, then I tried to find out a way, if I continue my own play and ignore this counterplay, does it work or not? I didn't like it that much, which finally brought me to this understanding that I have to do something about this plan. And then the next stage was to find out the best way, concrete way how to deal with it. So first trying a4, a6, b3, then getting this understanding that the b4 square then might become a target and might give black some counterplay, which and finally deciding that this b3 is the most precise way to stop black's counterplay, because I can keep the control on the b4 square. So I think that's a good example which shows that actually you can find the right path, and probably the way I played exactly this way was the only way to get an advantage. Otherwise, black would have enough counterplay. And this is an example that you can get to the right solution, the best sequence of moves, just using a very pure logic, the right method of thinking, and being very logical and consistent. Okay, after all, chess is a game of logic, they say. Yes, so it is important sometimes. Sometimes you can make moves by intuition, but sometimes you need a very straight, clear logic to solve the position on the board and to get to the right sequence of moves. So now let's check another example, which is a little bit different in its nature. This is a position I'm playing white against Paul van der Sterren, Vaikanzea 1998, long time ago. Paul van der Sterren is not so famous, not such a famous chess player, but in fact a very solid and strong grandmaster. He was even a participant of candidate matches in 1993, so quite a strong player. Now he doesn't play chess anymore. So this is a position white to play. Try to assess the situation. It's less clear what is black's idea or ideas and what both sides have to do. So take your time and try to go deep and understand all the small nuances of this position and potential plans and the potential scenarios, especially, let's say, maybe the place, the squares for each side, when the situation can turn into the favor of black or white. Yeah, so try to look a bit, further to see how the game can develop and what are the scenarios which can work for in favor of white or black, and come up with a move, of course. So finally, what is the move you're going to play, as usual, based on the understanding of what your opponent wants to do next. Okay, I will give you my vision of the position. First, the material is equal. Then the pawn structure is the very important aspect of any non-forced position. The pawn structure in general, of course, it's quite good for white, yeah, because he has this d5 pawn, which is limiting black's bishop and in general quite uncomfortable for black. And after all, it's a protected pass pawn, potentially, at least, let's say, in endgame. But black, this pawn structure is not so one-sided, yeah? Because just try to imagine that black managed to exchange the position of his queen and knight. So the knight is standing on d6 and the queen is on e7. Then with such a fantastic knight on d6 blockading the pawn, black actually can even maybe get some advantage at some point. He just can start playing on the c line. He also has the potential of organizing a pass pawn on the queen side. So it pretty much depends on who is going to be first. Yeah. So another important idea in this type of position, and of course that's why it's so important to study different pawn structure as a type of position, and also to have some practice, in different types of pawn structures, because then all those small nuances, what is favorable for you, what is not. And usually quite a typical idea for black, equalizing idea, is to push f5 in this type of position. Of course, it doesn't work still now, it's too early. But in general, that's one of the main ideas which white has to be careful about, because quite often after f5, okay, white can maybe take the pawn on e5, but black after fe takes back the d5 pawn, and then quite often it leads to a kind of sterilization of the position and pretty drawish scenario. But for the moment, f5 is probably not, it's too early yet to play. There are lots of options like knight g5, also the e5 pawn is hanging, but it's always in the air, f5, and that's very important to know about this position, or to figure out when you, if you don't know, to figure it out when you are thinking in these general terms, trying to understand the position. So what would be a good scenario for white? Actually, I think that driving the knight somewhere to c4, knight d2, knight c4 looks like a very good plan if it works. Maybe another plan is h5, knight h4, maybe f4, trying to play on this side. So black, what does he want? I think pretty obvious that one of the possible ideas is to play knight g6, knight f4. It looks very tempting. But another idea, as I've mentioned already, now we know that another idea would be to try to drive the knight to d6. So let's say knight c8, queen going away from d6, and then to get the knight on d6. The minus of this plan is that, okay, it takes 3 tempists to achieve it. And in middle game, it's not always that, let's put it mildly, that you have such amount of time, like 3 tempists, to realize your plan. Pretty likely that white is going to do something during these 3 moves, and okay, this is a potential idea, which again, as a 5, you have to understand that it's possible, but and to, as white, to watch out, you know, to be careful that black is never in time to realize it, and the other way around, if you're black, to try to find a way, or try to find a moment when you can do it, then you do it, because it's really improving black's position considerably. But for now, it seems to be a little far, away. So finally, we get to the more concrete question: what is black's next? As I've mentioned already, knight g6. But also, that is quite important. That black, I think that black wants to play bishop a6. In fact, it is favorable for black to change this the bishops, the pair of bishops. The situation will become, much easier for black once these bishops are exchanged. So all in all, we have a dilemma with white, as I see it at least. So what should I stop? Should I try to stop knight g6, knight f4, or trying to fight against bishop a6? A difficult question. I think as a way, with a very accurate play, black probably must be able to equalize in both cases. But if you want, maybe it's a matter of taste. Also, it pretty much, maybe strangely enough, it depends on the opponent you are playing against. Because I would say that after h5, the game becomes more positional. And it's a bit easier to play with black, because he doesn't have to do something risky or active to have a decent position. I decided to go bishop d3. That was my plan. So choosing, what is more important, to keep these bishops on the board and to limit the black bishop, or to stop knight g6, knight f4. I decided for the first. So let's see what will happen if white plays h5, which is definitely the most natural move in the position. Because first of all, it is useful. Anyway, white sometimes wants to play h6. It's a very healthy, natural move, and you stop knight g6. So there is always a temptation again to play it quickly. You just go h5 because it's so natural. But if you take a minute, if you have this general overview of the position, and you ask the right question, if you really take care of all black's ideas in this position, then you start to wonder: should I play h5? Should I let the bishop on a6 or not? And yeah, I would say another, of course, important point that knight d2 is in general, very typical maneuver and a useful one to try to get knight c4. But here it's not that effective because black has bishop a6 and maybe even rook c8 first is also possible. But bishop a6 and white has nothing better than changing these bishops, and I will tell you something about it later on. So otherwise, if white manages to get his knight to c4, it will be quite an improvement of white's position. Then, so h5, the natural move. Of course, I would have played it immediately if not bishop a6. Otherwise, it would have been a fantastic move. So to say, if white can manage both moves at the same time, bishop d3 and h5, probably he's just better. But yeah, sometimes you can't manage everything in life, yeah, or in the game of chess. So you have to give your opponent some counterplay because you cannot stop it all. So h5. Now, what is also another important point to notice, this is already kind of tactical idea, because of course black can seriously consider trying to fight for the c line, playing rook c8 at some point. But and this is a very logical and serious strategically idea, because he wants to play rook c3, rook fc8 to double on the c line. But here tactics, yeah, here you must see that this doesn't work because of knight d4. Okay, if you can call it tactics, it's just a move which you can miss because it's difficult in your mind to put the knight just on d4 with a pawn on a5, but of course there is a pin, yeah. And with a rook on d8, obviously it's not possible because the queen is protected, and here knight d4 is really very powerful because knight gets to e6 and with dramatic consequences for black. So rook c8 doesn't work tactically, and you just need now to stop bishop a6 and life will be fantastic. But of course bishop a6, and that's why I didn't play it, because I had a feeling that, let's say, if you change these bishops, bishop d3, bishop takes d3, rook takes d3, now white has much less room for really serious play for a win, you know, because now without these two bishops, the f5 idea becomes really serious. I mean, with actually a lot of exchanges and potential quick draw. Maybe not immediately f5, because white still has rook e1 and maybe he can still try. But let's say even if black just plays h6, it's quite difficult to understand how white can improve his position without allowing this f5 sooner or later. Because whatever he is trying to do to, let's say, improve the position of his pieces, like knight h4, looks logical, but immediately f5 comes, and after exchanges on f5, it's just a draw. Or let's say rook c1, getting the c line makes a lot of sense, but probably again f5, even immediately or one move later. So this f5 becomes a real equalizing option for black, and I think that black is very close to equality here. So maybe then another way of playing is rook e1, at least to keep now f5 is not really an option, because white can always take on f5, and with the bishop opens up the diagonal, bishop becomes very strong on b1. So at least we are fighting against f5. But let's say if black plays h6, just in case stopping white's potential idea of playing h6, even though it's can be pretty double edged for white to put the pawn on h6, but just in case h6, the thing is that of course it's theoretically again weakening all those white squares like g6 and potentially f5, but I don't see how white can make use of it because the knight on e7 is controlling it very well. And again, it's very difficult to see how white can improve his position. For example, knight h4 is hitting the air. Yeah, knight cannot either get to g6 or f5, so black already now can maybe, for instance, simply starting to play on the c line, because there is no knight d4. Yeah, knight is already on h4. And yeah, I don't know what is how white can really improve his position. Well, let's say once he gets his knight out of d3, then rook c8 comes. So what can be done? Maybe knight h2, trying to maneuver the knight, and maybe to leave some space for the queen on g3 to maybe to go to the queen side. But still, let's say bishop b5. Let's say just a logical move, improving a little bit the position of the bishop. Maybe at some point black wants to play bishop e8 and asking some questions about the h5 pawn. Knight g4. Okay, knight h6 is a threat, so king h8. Knight e3. Yeah, it's a nice maneuver with a knight on e3, but let's say rook c8. Now black wants to start doubling on the c line. I don't see how white can really make progress in this position. Black is extremely solid, and probably white will have to sooner or later anyway change this bishop. And but then again takes, and in this particular position black can simply go f5 again, and it's probably leads to just a draw, kind of equalizing exchanges. So that's why after h5 bishop a6, finally I decided that I'm not a, you know, I didn't like so much to allow the knight on f4, but I thought that the second scenario, allowing bishop a6, is giving me even less chances for advantage. So bishop d3, but this is a principal move, and now white already has quite a clear plan. Because, for example, again, rook c8, of course, knight d4 is very strong, but if black just trying to play slowly, maybe moving his bishop to d7 to improve the position of the bishop, then white already starts to get knight d2, knight c4, and then maybe even potentially f4 is coming. So let's try to see what happens in case of knight c8. Yeah, it's I mean, black tries to get his knight to d6, and that would improve his position, of course, significantly, but as I've mentioned already, it just takes too long time to get it there. And of course, white will do something in between. So here h5, and it seems to be that after queen e7, white is just in time to organize his attack. Knight h4, of course, threatening knight f5, knight d6, and situation would have been pretty decent for black now, but knight g6 comes, a very typical idea, attacking idea in such positions, hg, and yeah, the threat is just to mate on h7, and black can still play queen e8, stopping queen h4, queen h2, but after queen g4, anyway, queen h5 is a threat, and the only way to not to get mated for black is to play knight f7, gf, rook f7, but then, of course, the whole operation was very strange, yeah? To maneuver the knight, to leave, to move away the queen from d6 to e8. So white has a very serious initiative here. Bishop c4, now black has to put the rook on d6 to stop d6, and probably white will play something like queen g3, followed by f4. Again, the potential attack on the h file, not even mentioning some ideas like double attacks like queen a3 maybe, so white is probably better here. So that's why knight g6 is a logical move, but of course knight is very active on f4. But knight g6, in a way, it means already black burns all bridges. So after rook e1, that was my plan. Knight f4, bishop f1. Okay, I maneuvered my bishop to f1. It's pretty well placed there. Black couldn't manage to activate his bishop. Okay, he got his knight to f4, and now there was quite a significant strategical mistake, actually conceptual mistake, I would say, by Van der Sterren, by my opponent. Maybe he didn't feel the danger, he still felt that his position is rather solid, but in fact, with a knight on f4 and bishop still on b7, black strategically is doing quite badly. So in fact he has to play f5, whether now on the next move, but it's his only justification of the whole plan of knight g6, knight f4. And even if it looks extremely risky, and it is risky, it is scary to play f5, but there was no way back already. And so black played rook c8. So I'm sure he was considering f5, but it looks very dangerous. And then Van der Sterren, he decided, okay, no, I can lose by force after a5, so I better do something solid. But it's too late to do something solid already. If you want something solid, you already you shouldn't have played knight g6, knight f4. So the black's play was first inconsistent, and second maybe he didn't he didn't do the work of scanning the position in general, just having a very deep understanding of the position, which would lead him to a conclusion that he has to play f5 now, good or bad, so to say. So let's consider, by the way, another interesting idea is to play king h8 first, just a useful prophylactic move, and then trying to go f5. Of course, it gives white an important temp in knight d2, but maybe still after f5, I've analyzed this position. Again, white has some chances. It's not so easy for black, but black probably can hold it with a very accurate play. But the most principle is to play f5. Again, chess is a game between two people. It's a practical experiment, if you want. So you should also understand that there are certain practical tricks, certain patterns of thinking of people, and if some moves like f5 are easy to do for a computer because he can calculate very precisely and very deep, but for a human player, especially over a player who has a very positional, solid style, it's very difficult to commit to such move, because I will show you now some variations. Of course, it's impossible to calculate them out for both players when you play a game, but the general feeling that it's extremely dangerous, and it is objectively. So I understand my opponent who didn't want to do it, but again, as I've mentioned already, there was no way back anymore. So after f5, what's happening? Let's analyze this position. E takes f5, rook takes f5, knight g5. Of course, this is a very dangerous move. White simply wants to get the knight on e4 and maybe to move the d6 pawn. Black's king is not feeling too safe. By the way, maybe white also has knight e6 ideas. So now, good or bad, black has to take on d5. Close his eyes and take on d5. Bishop c4. And I guess somewhere here, most of the players would just stop and say, okay, I'm not going to do it with black. It just looks like terribly dangerous. It might be simply losing by force. And it's really true, it's possible, unless, again, if there is any valid choice for black other than going for this position, probably he would. But in fact, sometimes you need to close your eyes and, as they say, bite a bullet and just go for it, and hope it will work. And this is exactly the case when after queen c5, with a very, very precise moves, with a lot of luck, I would say, it always works for black tactically, and even though he's still a bit worse at the end of the variation, but probably he can save the game. So queen c5, Now, if bishop b3, for instance, king h8, looks very shaky, but okay, who am I to argue with the machine, which says that it's enough to hold the position. So, but queen b3, this is really looking worse and worse, because now there is another diagonal pin, not only the pin on the D line, but also on the diagonal. But if you have good nerves and calculate 80 million moves per second, then you are not worried. You play king h8, only move, knight e4, queen c6. Ooh, looks really scary. Now, don't ask me why, for instance, knight c3 doesn't work. Well, I guess, yeah, I think I understand why. I think there is some amazing tactics, bishop g8. Yeah, that's actually very nice. Yeah, because now rook takes d8 come without check, and black is threatening mate on g2. Another, by the way, idea is if g3, this at least I checked with the computer. If g3, the absolutely only move for black to save the game is rook ff8. Everything works again. So in the main line goes like bishop takes d5, rook takes d5 only move, rook takes d5 again, queen d5 only move, because after knight d5, rook d1, because of this weakness of the 8th rank, black is just losing a piece, the knight on d5. So queen takes d5, and it's still not over. Takes on d5, takes rook d1, and now black has to retreat with his knight to g8, knight d6, rook f6, rook d7, knight f7 check is a threat, so h6, and white actually can take back the pawn and still press in this endgame. Knight f7 check, king h7, let's say rook takes a7, e4, knight e5. Okay, computer gives 0-3, 0-4 for white, which means that black definitely, objectively must be able to hold this position, but it's not a draw yet. Yeah, still white is pressing. So why do I show you all those variations? Because it's a course about positional chess, but it's quite important just for your feeling, yeah, of the development of the game, how the things are developing after f5. Because, you know, if you just switch on the engine and you see that f5 0-0, or I don't know 0-2, okay, and the move which was played in the game gives white a big advantage, then you just feel like, okay, the black player simply played a terrible move, he blundered or whatever. But you know, it's quite important to understand that, you know, sometimes there are some practical elements of the game, and when you saw this line, you understand why f5 was not played. Yeah, how dangerous it is humanly, and how difficult it is to commit to such a move. Anyway, as I've mentioned earlier, that had to be done immediately after king h8, but my opponent, he just didn't like it, and he played rook c8, probably assuming that his position is still, you know, pretty solid. But in fact, one mistake, it's a one serious, I would say, strategical, conceptual mistake, but still it doesn't look, by the way, like it's a big mistake. But in fact, it is. So after knight d2, all black's play is not justified anymore. Yeah, so he's not in time to play f5, because now knight c4 comes. And from this moment on, this is this turning point I've mentioned already a few times in this course, that you just make one wrong or one right move at the most important critical moment of the game, and everything starts to go whether right, whether wrong, yeah, depending on which move you made, a good one or bad one. And now it's like till the end of the game, it seems that black is practically helpless. In fact, it's true that it's already an extremely difficult position for black. So king h8, queen b3, and very important that f5. Anyways, it's clear that if it had to be played, it had to be played two moves earlier, but now it doesn't work just simply because g3, knight c4, and everything collapses. So And white's play is very easy. Now next is g3, kicking the knight out, knight goes to c4, kicking the queen out, and it's all white now. In fact, black's position is simply not holdable anymore. So rook c5, okay, black is trying to do something to double on the c line, but g3, knight back, knight c4, queen back, queen a3. So now white develops his initiative and attacking something on each single move. a7 pawn is hanging, rook e8, very sad move, but what to do? Have to protect the pawn. Rook c1, now white starts to fight for the c line. Okay, black's position is strategically lost, basically. There are just too many weaknesses and too bad position of most of his pieces. h6, okay, yeah, I mean, not a great move, but anyway, the position is bad already. Knight e3, so now black cannot keep the control on the c line anymore, because yeah, if rook a c8, he's just losing the pawn on a7, so on top of all other miseries, black has to give up the c line, which is of course a critical line in this position, and then white very quickly will enter. You should also note that white has a very strong positional idea here to play king h2 and bishop h3 also, to enter with the bishop on this diagonal, controlling the pawn, the c8 square, and also asking black's queen where he's going to go. So black is basically simply lost. Rook a5 was played, queen b2, on top of everything. Already my opponent was in big time trouble, because you always spend much more time on your moves when you have no good moves, or very few good moves. So queen b2, knight e7, well, also the rook on a5 is very badly placed. King h2, another very annoying move for black, because bishop h3 comes. Okay, nothing can save black already, but he played queen d8, which, of course, even if I just play bishop h3, black's position is really bad, but there is a tactical opportunity for white to win, basically to win on the spot, which is knight c4, and yeah, rook c5 is only move, and knight takes c5. Okay, small tactics which finishes the game, because after rook takes c1, white has knight f7 check, obviously, taking the queen, and after fe, I just take on c5 and take on b7, and still keeping a huge positional advantage, but being a pawn up on top of it. So I think after knight e5, my opponent simply resigned. And yeah, it's quite an interesting example. Sometimes it actually happens. I noticed that all of a sudden the position is collapsing very quickly. You just make one mistake and everything starts to collapse. So it's very, yeah, that's an example of this scenario. Yeah, I wanted to show at least one example of this scenario when you have to choose between two different counterplays your opponent has. But at least in order to make a choice, you need to, first of all, to understand that he has two ideas, not only knight g6, but also bishop a6. And once you go deep into the position, you find that this is a scenario that he has two ideas, and at least you can start choosing. In this particular case, I would say, I wouldn't say that bishop d3 is necessarily better than h5 or other way around. It's a choice. It's, I would say, a matter of choice, because in both cases, white probably keeps a certain advantage, but with a very good play, black is probably able to hold the position. But I at least made what I could, you know, to to try to fight for advantage. And yeah, this was a very important moment also, yet to you know, for you, what I would like, just for your subconsciousness, if you want, just to note how quickly the game, a seemingly solid normal position can go totally wrong way if you just miss the right moment. So your play has to be consistent. If you put your knight on f4, then okay, good or bad, go for f5. You change his mind, rook c8, just one mistake, and practically the game is over. Okay, this is of course the case in top level chess, but anyways, it's better to be consistent and to follow your plan. Once you already have chosen certain plan, if it's not a very bad plan, then just keep on going with it. Be logical when you play chess. Be logical, be consistent, and try to have a deep knowledge, understanding and knowledge of typical pawn structures, because this is extremely helpful, to find the right path during a game, because sometimes pawn structures like this are quite complex, and small details can change a lot. So that's why I actually always advocate players, especially with black, because you have less room for experiment, so to say, as black, not to play every single opening, but just to know well your pawn structures, maybe to play not only one but two openings, but really to study well on top of opening theory, engines, concrete force variations, to study the pawn structures, the typical games and typical motifs in each pawn structure. Okay, so for this prophylactic, I would say for already a couple of hours, if not more, we are fighting against counterplay of the opponent. Now you know how to totally destroy the opponent's counterplay, hopefully, after those few examples I've shown you. And it's time to move on to a slightly different subject. I mean, it will still be definitely positional play, prophylactics, but a little bit different in different types of positions. And I will tell you at the beginning of the next lesson what will be the thematic of the next set of the examples I'm going to show you. I've decided to record a small bonus track for you, just which doesn't have a clear relation to the subject of this course. But since I explained you this concept while showing the game against Ivyakov, if you remember, I advise you to have in your mind this picture, the idea of where you want to transfer your pieces in ideal world, so to say. In the ideal case, if you will have a chance to do it, here you remember it was trying to get bishop on c2, rook on a1, bishop h4, knight f2, and then push e4. It might sound abstract, and of course it's difficult to manage very often, in full during a game, because your opponent is also, having his own plans. But anyway, I find it's very useful to have this in your mind, this concept and the picture, if I may, of the situation, of the ideal situation and ideal position which you want to achieve. By the way, I will remind you that few moves later, if you look at this position which happened on the board, it's white managed it. White just needs to play rook e1 and e4 to have to complete his plan. Yeah, so it can happen. I mean, it's very useful to think about it and to have it in your mind when you play chess, when you play a game. So I want to show you one example, because one thing is theory. Another thing is it's always useful to have a practical example when to show that it can work, and it worked exactly in this fashion as I've advised you. I mean, it's exactly what I managed to do in this particular game. I'm playing white. It's my game from Moscow Olympiad 1994. Oh, good old days. Against Branko Damljanovic, a very experienced Serbian grandmaster. So of course white is better. And here, yeah, I was very happy about my play. Again, I was young, and at that time it was something rather new to me. So I didn't, in general, I was just learning how to think in concepts, in those abstract ideas, like where do I want my pieces to be. They were still rather new to me, and I was very happy that, you know, this moment the idea came to my mind that, okay, black is very passive, he has no real counterplay, so I want to meditate a bit on where ideally my pieces should belong to, you know, where do I want to put my pieces in order to have the maximum effect, you know, to they're as active as possible, also trying to prevent the potential, I wouldn't say counterplay, it's too strong word, but at least maybe the only idea for black, active idea, is to try to push c5. Here, so I want to, of course, to stop it. But otherwise, in general, my plan is probably, of course, black has weaknesses. I will attack them, but black is able to protect both of this a7 and c6 pawn. So probably I will need to open a second front on the king side to push my pawns, and then yeah, black being stuck with those weaknesses on the queen side probably will not manage to protect his king side. That is a very typical scenario in such situation in endgames, that finally, yeah, if you start to create a second weakness on the other side of the board, black is just too passive to manage to defend both flanks. Yeah. So anyway, those are general considerations, and then so let's meditate together about where do you want your pieces to be with white. Using the fact, very rare, of course, not very often it happens, this situation when your opponent has zero counterplay, basically. So he can just stay and wait, I mean, and cannot really do anything constructive. But it happens sometimes, and then, so I decided, well, I had this setup in my mind. Okay, I like my rook on a5. First of all, it's pressing the pawn on a7, and at the same time, it helps my play on the king side, which is going to be probably g4, f4, g5, and so on. So rook on a5, knight, I like the knight on d4. c5, of course, is a very, very good square as well, but then black often would have knight d7, and I don't want to change my knight. Yeah, I think my knight is better than the opponent's one, so I want to keep the knights. Therefore, probably d4, and then bishop would be doing pretty well somewhere on b3. Yeah, so we have, and then I can, once I manage this, just to watch out for potential c5, and I start to push my pawns g4, f4, g5, e5, something like that. So once you have this picture, the ideal position, you know, and then in this particular situation, you can simply do it. There is nothing which can stop you from, you know, getting this position. So very quickly, I achieved this setup, which I wanted to achieve. So g6, rook a5. You can start with rook a5. I started with knight d4. It doesn't make a very big difference. Knight b6. Okay, king d6, for instance. Now, the only thing that on the way, white has to be a bit careful about not allowing black to play c5, but that's not too difficult because it's just too many weaknesses black has. So let's say king d6. If he tries to get c5, then bishop d3. c5, knight b5 check, and you just take the pawn. So, and if black defends rook b7, then rook a6, again stopping c5. Now if knight b6, you go rook a5, rook c7, knight b3 is of course possible, but I want my knight on d4, yeah, so that's why maybe king d2. Again, c5 is not working because you can take and take on a7. And let's say rook b7. Now black is already very passive. He cannot get the c5 anymore. And now f4. And let's say if knight d7, king c3. Okay, you see a little bit of accuracy is required, a little bit of calculation. Because here, for instance, again, black doesn't have c5. Well, because of course, knight b5 check is unpleasant, but here also white tactically can win a piece, yeah? Take, and with king d5, there is bishop c4 check. So white is winning a piece here, taking on c5. Yeah, and then, yeah, finally I'm getting my setup. So this or that way, I get what I want. Knight b6, bishop c4. Of course, knight takes c4, rook takes a7 check, rook b7, bishop b3. Next, rook a5 is coming. And yeah, that was the case, bishop d7, rook a5. And I'm ready to start pushing my pawn. So all my pieces now are exactly where I wanted them to be. And well, now Damljanovic, he was in very big time trouble already. He played knight a8. Maybe trying to get knight c7, knight b5 check. I wanted to stop even this, so I played bishop a4, although you can also just go g4, g5. The position is very bad, black's position. So I went bishop a4, just to stop even this. You know already by now that my style is in such situations, it's not to give any single constructive idea for my opponent if I can. But sometimes it's, yeah, you know, you don't have to. Yeah. Here it's a matter of taste. You could have also win the game with g4, g5. But okay, that's something which in this particular situation, it doesn't matter so much already. But sometimes it can be useful just to stop, you know, even the slightest counterplay of your opponent. So that's why bishop a4 was played. And actually, I think that my opponent simply lost on time here in this position. He was in very big time trouble. Oh, but of course, the position is bad. So I will just show you. This is already just for your maybe potentially for to show how to win such position, to improve maybe a little bit your endgame technique if there is a problem with it. Usually the plan is in such situation, what I try to do is first eliminate all counterplay, any constructive plan. Then when your opponent is passive, then you just very often you open up a second front, let's say, because for instance here rook c7, rook c5, king d6, f4, knight b6, bishop b3. So we have a position when black has absolutely no counterplay. Let's say rook c8. And now, of course, actually white can already win in a quite straightforward way, like e5 check, takes, for instance, king e7, king d3, activating your king. Now, let's say black is just staying, king e4, e6, king e5, and then you will break through somehow. But in any case, yeah, but I even like in such situation, I like first to improve to a maximum my position, really, you know, as much as I can, just to be sure that there is no way black can save the game. But in any case, usually in a abstract, you know, theoretical, if I want to put it in words, what you do usually, yes, so you stop counterplay, you make your opponent totally passive, you open a second front, then you improve the position of your pieces to a complete maximum, you know, what you, and then there will be a way to break through, you know, then you just find out what is the way, how exactly you want to win it. So, but at some point on, quite often you will need to calculate a little bit. I mean, a couple of variations just to make sure that it's winning by force. But my style is trying to improve it to a maximum. That's why I would probably like to play h5. Let's say black is just staying because he cannot do anything anyway. King d3, rook e7, for example. Yeah, h6. I like my pawn on h6 because now h7 pawn becomes another target, another weakness. Rook e8, and then you choose the moment when when you break through. I think, for instance, here one of the many ways for white to win this position is just to go g4. Now, of course, bishop takes g4, is bad because rook takes c6 check, and then whether f6 pawn is lost, or if king is 7, rook c7, a7 pawn. So g4 and rook c8. Okay, let's say black, he cannot do anything constructive, or he has to just to stay. g5, fg, rook g5, and yes, so finally you break through on the king side. For instance, after c5 now, you can just win simply by doing this. You see, always useful to have to improve the position of your pieces to a maximum. If the pawn would have been still on h2, things are not so clear. With the pawn on h6, you created another weakness on h7, and now you just promote the pawn. Or let's say if black is continuing to just to stay, then for instance there is a good plan now. Rook a5. You see how good is rook on the 5th rank. Yeah, by the way, it's extremely effective. So let's say rook a8. Now a very nice and simple way of winning this position is knight f3. Transferring the knight to g5, and finally you see it's in action. This theoretical idea of creating two weaknesses are in action. You have some many forces of black protecting the queen side, and then they are not enough to protect the king side. So white simply wants to play knight g5 and take on h7, and this a7 pawn is still hanging all the time, so white is just winning. Okay, it was a small example. Wanted to show it to you. That you shouldn't neglect this concept of trying to understand, trying to have a certain picture in your mind, the ideal picture of the best case scenario. Of course, it's also good to understand what are the threats of your opponent and what are the worst case scenarios, maybe even more important. But don't neglect this opportunity to think about the best case scenarios, because sometimes, I can tell you, sometimes those best case scenarios you manage actually to realize if you play correctly.